Hello and welcome to Data Center Management with PowerShell. So in this section, I'm going to cover working with storage and a file server, managing virtual machines on Azure, administering users and groups in Active Directory, and managing an IIS web server. Hello and welcome to the video Managing Storage and a File Server with PowerShell. In this video, we're going to turn raw physical disks into a storage pool. Use that storage pool to create a virtual disk. Once we have that virtual disk, we can create a partition, format it, and create an SMB share on the partition. Now here on our Windows server, I have added 2 data disks. So far they are uninitialized. There's no partitions on them or anything else. I'm going to go ahead and we can get the disk. And get disk is really great because it shows us all of the disks that are on the system, including USB, iSCSI, or any other kind of disks. Get virtual disk. We don't have any virtual disks on here now, and this is a little bit strange because here we've got virtual hard disk and MSFT virtual disk, but when we do get virtual disk, there's nothing there. The distinction here is that get virtual disk, we are talking about the actual virtual disk on the operating system, and in get disk, we are talking about all kinds of disks, including Azure disks that are being loaded at the management plane and kind of underneath the operating system level. So we don't see any virtual disks that are created on this OS, but there are some disks, even though the name of them is virtual disk, they are at the operating system level, they are full disks. In fact, we can look at get physical disk as a distinction. We can see those same disks are indicated there. And get physical disk is very useful to us, especially because of the can pool parameter. Can pool indicates which are available to be grouped together into a storage pool, which we're going to create next. So get physical disk can pool shows us the 2 disks, each 1 terabyte, that are waiting to be used by the operating system. We're going to go ahead and get the physical disk that can be pooled and save them into a variable called poolable disks. Our host here, so give us something new to work with. Now, as we're going to create a storage pool, the storage pool requires the storage subsystem name. Let's take a look here at what storage subsystem our physical disks are part of. All of them are on the front, have a storage subsystem with a friendly name, Windows Storage, on the computer name. And you can use a wildcard to indicate that storage subsystem friendly name so that you can use this across the enterprise without having to worry about what computer it's operating on. Here is the storage pool creation. We're going to create a new storage pool out of the physical disks that we just indicated on the storage subsystem friendly name Windows Storage, and a friendly name for our storage pool will be data pool. Now with our data pool created, that is the storage pool named data pool, we can pipe that into new virtual disk so that we can create a virtual disk. New virtual disk, by the way, is hugely flexible. There are so many different options and the ways that you can configure, create your disk, everything from the size. We notice that we are using use maximum size, which is very easy, but you can also use dash size, 100 megabytes, or 10 gigabytes, or 100 terabytes, or whatever you want. You can use the PowerShell built-in converter, that is 100 megabytes, will just turn magically into a number of bytes, which is the actual thing that size is looking for. If you press Control and space, you can see that size is looking for an integer, not a string, and it's looking for the number of bytes. In fact, I mentioned the bytes being the unit of measure for size, and the only reason I know that is because I've gone to read the instructions on it, which are right here. New virtual disk, all of these parameters. Notice things like the number of data copies. You can even set storage tier sizes. So there is a lot of flexibility. If you click down to the optional parameters, again, this is on docs.microsoft.com, you can get descriptions for each of the parameters. For our parameters, we're going to keep things very simple. We're going to name it friendly name data disk. We're going to use the maximum size, and we're going to use the built-in resiliency settings of the storage pool. The storage pool, if you don't specify something different, then you will get mirror as the default resiliency type. So to go ahead and create this new virtual disk, you notice here it is mirrored, and even though we have 2 terabytes total, size is 1 terabyte. Here we can save that data disk into a variable called source data disk, and then we're ready to initialize and format. Our disk is ready to be initialized. We can do that by piping the source data disk into the initialized disk. Now that that's done, we can take a look and we can see the disk. This is something that's different than what we had before. In fact, let me go up a little bit to see what the get disk looked like before. Here was our get disk before we did these operations. We just had the two disks, each unpartitioned, nothing on them. It was just GPT. Now, instead of those two, we have an MBR style data disk, and it doesn't recognize it as 2 terabyte drives. It just looks at it as 1 terabyte drive. Still, we can look at the get physical disk, and that shows us the 4 physical disks that we have on the system, and notice now that none of them say they are able to be pooled. All of them have been spoken for with existing pools. Okay, so now let's partition. So we will get the disk with the friendly name data disk, and we can pipe that to new partition. Again, we use the maximum size, and this time we can assign a drive letter S. Now we can format. Notice here we are getting a little indicator down here. You need to format the disk in drive S before you can use it. So Windows is prompting us, want me to format it for you. We'll go ahead and do that within PowerShell. The drive is completed, it's formatting. We now have a drive letter S with the label source data. It is almost a terabyte in size. There's some that's kept for overhead. Now we can create a share. We're almost done. All that's left is creating a directory and sharing that directory. And now I can even show you that we can switch to that directory. Notice that we're using the SMD where we're looking at the server and then the share name. So push location, by the way, is change location, just like the commandlet set location, but instead it pushes a location, which means that it will retain your previous setting. And when you pop, you can go back to where you were before. Pop location, and we're back to C. So you can see that working with PowerShell, you're able to do a lot of administrative tasks, including configuration of the shares, the file system, the underlying drives themselves.